It's been my hard experience that humans and aliens don't mix.
What about you and me?
What about us? We can look like them. We blend in. A lot of aliens can't. And people in this world don't have much tolerance for others who look different. I say that as an alien and someone who's worn the face of a black man for 15 years.
Hi, everyone out there on the internet. My name is Evan Narcis. I'm a writer, journalist, and critic. I'm here because we're going to talk about truth, justice in a DC Comics way. I am joined by the cast members of various DC Comics Warner Brothers TV shows who'll be talking about the characters they portray and why they're important in a world where people from outside the mainstream society often can be marginalized and treated unfairly. I'm first joined by Nicole Maines, who plays Nia Nal, aka Dreamer on Supergirl, David Harewood, who plays John Jones, Martian Manhunter, also on Supergirl, Marvin Crandon Jones, who plays Tobias Whale on Black Lightning, and Anna Diop, who plays Corey Anders, aka Starfire, on Titans. And we're also joined by Flash showrunner and screenwriter Eric Wallace. You know, obviously we're living in a world where we see the turmoil and the unrest born from the righteous indignation, I think, by a lot of people who live in systems that they feel aren't fair and don't treat them as fully human. So I guess the first question I want to ask you guys was, you know, if you grew up reading comic books or science fiction or any kind of speculative fiction, can you pinpoint moments where like you felt like your innate sense of justice or what's right and wrong was shaped by that kind of stuff?
I was 10 and I grew up reading comic books and science fiction movies and horror movies and all that stuff. And there wasn't anything for me, clearly, because Spider-Man and Thor and Superman and Batman and The Flash were all white folks. And then my older sister took me to go see a movie called Night of the Living Dead. And zombies, and I fell in love with horror movies, but it starred Dwayne Jones, a black man. It blew my mind, not only because it was the first time I saw such a powerful representation of blackness on the screen that was speaking to me. You know, it moved me. At the end of the movie, spoilers if you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead by now, he gets killed by a mob of, quite frankly, white folks. It taught me something that I had kind of suspected before age 10, that my parents had talked about a little bit of their experiences in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But here it was right on the screen for me, a black man trying to do the right thing. And his reward for it was death. It's pretty hardcore. I've never forgotten that. And it informs everything I do to this day.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, David, like I feel like a lot of what you do with Martian Manhunter and the writers on Supergirl do is a very obvious metaphor for, you know, either immigration or coming from into a culture which is ready to misunderstand you. Do you have like formative experiences from your entertainment as a kid or a younger person?
I mean, just going into the acting profession was going into a profession where I felt like a foreigner. I felt like an outsider, and it took a while for me to kind of get comfortable, particularly with, you know, being kind of the first generation of what you might call sort of classically trained black actors in London. On stages in London, playing characters that had been essentially played by white actors, historically played by white actors. Even Othello was played by a white actor. So it was a pretty hostile first couple of years for me because they were very dismissive, pretty racist. So it felt like I was. It was a very tough sort of introduction into the profession. And I think, you know, just like the Martian Manhunter, who is an incredibly powerful a character, you know, you have this sort of rage that's kind of within you, but you just have to find some way of dispelling it and some way of controlling it. But certainly, yeah, I mean, my introduction to the world into the world of show business and acting was extremely, extremely tough. And I wouldn't really wish that on anybody.
Anna, I want to ask you a question about Starfire. Are you bringing anything personal to inform the character?
I come from a planet called Tamarin. I remember I came here to Earth on this ship.
What I learned about her planet was that it was destroyed and pillaged and taken over, as were many of the inhabitants on it. And then those surviving left and created a new place for themselves that was later on also destroyed and pillaged.
It's called Gulran Desdar, Death of Worlds.
And I'm from Senegal, West Africa, and similar things happened to us there. It was colonized and destroyed in a lot of ways as well, and attacked. And we rebuilt, but never really quite found our grounding again either. And so I think Black people can relate a lot to Starfire's origins and where she's from. I certainly can. And yeah, that was something I found that I could relate to. And also just coming to a new place. I moved to America when I was 6 years old, and from Senegal, and had to assimilate and had to acclimate and had to learn the language and the people, and found them sometimes odd and interesting, and all the things that Starfire finds from humans. But yeah, certainly there were a lot of similarities for me and Starfire.
Yeah, my parents immigrated from Haiti before I was born. And the wildest thing to me about growing up here, identify as Haitian American, is like, you know, you realize the stereotypes about Black Americans get exported all over the world, right? So my mom would invoke some of these in her conversations. I'm like, Mom, you realize other people who are not like us probably think the same thing of us. You know, it was really wild to kind of like experience that tiered kind of like stereotyping where, like, you know, oh, okay, you think we're better than them, but based on what exactly? Just from coming somewhere else. But, you know, this is one of the ways that this systemic injustice has kind of trickled down to create fissures in different communities. I want to throw the next question to Nicole, because Dreamer obviously is a lot different in Supergirl than in the original comic book source material. Did you like lean on a sense of community to help, you know, ground your sense of the character and your portrayal of the character on the show?
Yeah, so for Dreamer, there really wasn't any source material because, of course, there's Dream Girl from the Legion of Superheroes comics.
Yield or die.
Just take it down to like a 7.
Yield or else.
I just wanted to fill her with this sense of, holy crap, I'm a superhero, and kind of take people on that journey with her, because before that, we didn't have anybody. We didn't have anyone in the comics or really anywhere who was like us. We didn't have trans people in that environment and in that spotlight.
Nap time.
So I kind of wanted to fill her with that same excitement that the rest of the community has watching her, because I think anytime I go to a convention or I talk to other trans people about it, we both have this sense of just complete overwhelming excitement and giddiness.
I know the flip side of that can be feeling like, you know, like a lot of pressure. How do you modulate that?
Now we're starting to see more and more representation, and now we're starting to see more trans people in different situations and different shows and genres and spotlights. We even have more trans superheroes now. I see you, Titans.
Yeah.
And right? Watch the show, love the show.
Oh, thank you.
I know when I first started playing Dreamer, I was so terrified to do anything halfway indecent or halfway bad and let her make bad choices, because I was like, no, she has to be perfect. She has to be likable. Like, if she's not absolute perfection, then, you know, messed it up. No more trans superheroes. We can't do it. They're bad. But the further we got and the more representation that was out there, I started feeling safe to let Nia and let Dreamer make poor choices. And we saw that in this past season. We did a whole episode about trans violence.
He wants me to stop being a superhero.
He's going after my community to bully me into it.
Listen to me, Nia. Listen, we will find this guy.
Yeah, we will. And when we do, I'll bury him.
And we really saw Dreamer fall into this dark, angry, violent, vengeful place. And she kind of became this vigilante anti-hero full of hate for an episode.
You make me sick.
And I wasn't afraid to go there with her at that point because I knew that we had laid the foundation and that there was other representation to show not all trans people are like this. And it was okay for her to be angry in that moment.
It gives me a nice segue to talk to Marvin because, you know, I think that's one of the things that Black Lightning feels so freeing about it is that, you know, it's a whole cast that's majority Black folks, right? And so, you know, you're a person who's playing a shady character, a villain, you know, a self-serving character, and that allows you to kind of be nasty, be self-serving and egotistical in a way, which is really fun to watch. Do you feel like that adds to the discourse about what kind of representation is possible?
Yeah. You know, I relate to a lot to what Nicole said because for so long growing up, there was no representation for Black people with albinism on television and in film. And when it was very vague as to what the humanity of albinism entailed. Even in the comic book world, being a fan of comics and, you know, growing up in the hood, you know, and there was no representation of the hood, even in the comics, you know, and from what that I was watching. So, and when Halloween came around and it was time to pick what superhero I wanted to be, there was no superhero I felt that looked like me, you know, whether melanated or the unmelanated version of Black. And that was for a lot of times disheartening. And I have to admit, when I was in my youth, you know, I loved Batman and I loved Superman and these things, you know, but soon I found different heroes in Black exploitation films that became my superhero, Shaft and things like that. So my hat's off to Salim Akil because he had a vision to really bring a lot of humanity to the character I played, Tobias Well.
I am unlike other men. The laws of convention and morality do not apply to me.
To play a character that for so long has lived in a world, the DC universe, and I saw how I missed something here, you know, and that there is a representation and that there is a likeness that I can relate to in this world of comics. And when I was commissioned to play him, I took that responsibility, you know, extremely hard, you know, and the injustices that people with albinism face around the world, the ignorance that people with albinism face around the world. Salim and CW and DC gave me an opportunity to debunk those things and create a new representation and a new likeness.
Finally, a brother with some heart.
I really, really revel in the idea that you see the humanity in a Black man with albinism. You see his origin. You see the discrimination he faced as a child from his own family, his own father and his own mother. You see what people in the neighborhood thought of him, who truly were him, but just because they didn't look like him, didn't have the understanding of who he truly was. You know, they say that intolerance is ignorance matured. So what I'm able to do through this character is change the narrative of that intolerance and change the narrative of that ignorance. You know, you see a Black man with albinism driving fancy vehicles, you know, and a lot of times when we were born with albinism, we're told we never can drive. And I own several cars. And so it's a blessing to be able to defy the odds in that. And I think, you know, we all share this on this panel that we're playing in the world that, you know, didn't necessarily invite us in the interim, but we've had to be accepted in because you have to bring truth to power, and I think that each of us individually do that in our own prospective ways.
That's great.
Amen. My God.
David, I want to go back to you because you obviously grew up in the UK, where there's a different history in terms of Black-white relations. Are there different histories that some of our viewers may not be aware of in the UK that you've lived through and kind of inform your idea of heroism?
Many people in England, have always thought that racism was an American issue, and they don't think there's any racism in this country. And having grown up being kind of chased by knife-wielding skinheads and guys with cricket bats and skinheads, rude boys. Having grown up in this country like that, it's been sort of it's astonishing that people feel that this is some kind of open, tolerant, lovely country, as they call it. It's like I don't know what country you guys grew up in, but that wasn't the country that I grew up in. So it's been tough because, as you say, with the Windrush generation, many of our stories just really haven't been told, haven't been rightly, our stories have been sort of silenced. Our histories have not been taught. So even though I'm very lucky in that because I've spent a lot of time in the US, and I can, I see the power of Blackness in America and the power of Black America. It's very, very different here in the UK, and it's been extremely difficult to make our voices heard. We don't have the organization, we don't have the numbers, and it gets incredibly frustrating because it's just hard to get those stories out.
Like all these shows, you have these characters that have to create families for themselves, create relationships that empower them. And Eric, I want to talk to you a little bit about obviously Barry and all the characters on The Flash kind of have both biological and found family, and there's a blending there. Why do you think that's so important to portray on the screen?
I think it's important to show that mix because that's America. America doesn't look like the shows that I often watched in reruns, that had all white casts. I used to watch Lost in Space. I really like space shows, right? They're flying around and Dr. Smith, and there's a robot that's all cool, and they're fighting people. Yeah, it's groovy, right? There weren't any Black people on that show, at least not that I recall. At least not until Deep Space Nine in the 90s. That's the show that spoke to me. But now that I'm, running a show with an interracial marriage, talk about taking it seriously.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
We have to show every week that we can be a family. We have to show every week because there's kids watching The Flash. I take it really seriously. I don't want those kids growing up with what I grew up. It has to be better, right? I don't want a Black child who's 8 to 14, 22, 72. Please watch my show. Whatever age you are, I don't want you to not see yourself. So you have that mixed cast. But more importantly, you probably live in a world where even if you're Black, you are forced. You're not choosing this. You are forced to leave your house at some point, leave your family, and encounter a world where you are not encountering a power structure that empowers you. You have to have the tools to deal with that. You may have to fight for yourself. You may have to educate, or you may just have the privilege of being. That's so important, to have the privilege of just existing in peace. So every week, every story I'm telling, I talk to my writers about this all the time. Speak authentically. I think that's been mentioned a couple times here. Speak authentically, speak with the truth. And that family dynamic, understand that it's not just your immediate family, right? It's not just Barry and Iris because they are married. There's the Joe and Cecile relationship, but then there's also Cisco and Camilla, right? Hispanic folks. There's their daughter, Nora, from the future, XS, who is a lesbian. All of these people matter. And I want to show them all more than just getting along. I want to show them all being themselves and getting along. That's equality. That's what I'm going for.
I want to get at the idea that, you know, these characters are mutable and changeable and can be interpreted differently depending on the needs of the story and the times we live in. So let's start with you, Anna. I'm putting it very mildly, but a lot of people are like, that's not Starfire. She don't look like that. So how did you, find your way to like feeling confident in your portrayal of the character?
She isn't from here, and she has to find her way.
Whatever this is you're going through, please, let us help.
And she finds a group of people that she creates family with.
To the Titans.
And those are the most important things about Starfire. Her spirit to do what's right, her courage, these are the things that I held on to because those are the things that I could relate to. It was shocking for me when my casting was announced to get all the vitriol that I did. I mean, it was insane. Like, it was just, I didn't understand it even from a logical standpoint because she was an orange alien and not a human person that was aligned with any actual race. But what I did understand in that is this inherent idea that people have that white is always the default, right? And even myself, when I read a script and it's not described as 40s male Black or 40s male Hispanic or 40s male whatever, I immediately imagine a white person. And that's an issue. Like, that's that kind of anti-work that we have to do, right? And we all need to rewire ourselves to not let that always be the default.
To switch off you, Nicole, you faced a different challenge, which is the idea that like your character could spawn a whole heroic legacy, Like one of the big metaphors with your character is like, we can continue to exist. We can continue to find ways to exist deep into the future we can't even imagine. Like, is that part of your process at all when you're thinking about Dreamer and how you're portraying her?
Yeah, I mean, sort of what Anna was saying, the most important thing about Dreamer are the values that are important to her and the things that make up her character. And I think her transness is such a minuscule part of who she is, an important part, but it is one facet of her entire identity. And so when I'm playing her, I'm not focusing on her transness or the legacy of her transness. I'm focusing on who Dreamer is, who is Nia, and portraying her just as I would any other character, because portraying her as a person is what is at the forefront of my mind. And some of the pushback I still get about Dreamer is the fact that we created this character. And people are like, oh, you had to create a whole new character just so you could shove this trans thing down people's throats. And I think there's this idea of forcing representation that's so terrible and so negative, and it's such a bad thing. And I'm like, well, what would you have us do? There was no real representation to work off of. We had to kind of, whip something up out of thin air because there wasn't anything else for us. And, people were like, oh, well, why didn't you just bring Dream Girl from the future? And I'm like, well, because we wanted this representation and we wanted to create a whole new character for us to call our own, who from the jump is trans, and that is who she is, and that is her legacy moving forward.
It's funny because that kind of riffs on a question I want to ask Eric, which is, you guys have covered so much like territory on The Flash in terms of taking inspiration from classic storylines. Is there something that you haven't done yet that you would like to do?
Yeah, I'm doing that this coming season.
And that's about all you can say about that, huh?
No spoilers here, folks. There is a particular character in the DC universe who is African American, literally, that I've been dying to bring in that I might have just figured out how to do it because it's so cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, you know? I'm gonna sneak it in there and we're gonna see what happens. And hopefully it'll pop. So yeah, I do struggle with it because obviously I'm surrounded by comic books behind me here. But that's part of the joy of being in this world. But I will say, and I don't know who just said it before, there's a reason why I'm drawn to this kind of material. We all keep saying it or circling around it, because I've always felt like an outsider in the world with which I am called a minority. I do not like that word. I'm just me, you know, I'm me. And I say that, yes, I've got a lot of stories I want to tell and I'll get to them as I can, but I'm drawn to this material because I have felt to these characters, a lot of them who are outsiders. I felt the same way my whole life growing up. I did not enjoy that. And now, again, I'll say it as long as people will listen to it. I don't want any more kids growing up the way I grew up. That is a mission for me. I take it so seriously. I don't want kids growing up feeling outsiders. When David described skinheads running at him with bats and beating him up, I just had a flashback to when I was 16. Dude, I'm with you. Horrible, horrible experiences that should never happen to young people, especially young Black folks. Sorry, it's the times and George Floyd and all these things, they flow through me as a storyteller. And I talk to my staff about this all the time. And all these shows that I see here, Black Lightning, Supergirl, and Titans, do such an amazing job of taking what's going on right now and infusing them, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly. We're not so subtle sometimes on Flash. It's part of the fun. But seriously, taking those things and giving them back to the audience in a way that young people can learn and say, okay, this is a better way to behave. This is a better way to get along and to be tolerant and to celebrate the inclusion of everyone. Let's celebrate that, you know?
What would you guys like to see tackled on your shows in a metaphorical way? Like what issues would you like to see dealt with?
Our show deals with a lot of social justice issues from episode 1. Now the issues that we're faced with have compounded, and I'm sure that everyone here is experiencing. You know, as artists and creatives, I'm really excited to see what kind of stories we're able to tell now, the truth that we're able to tell now that a unanimous veil has been lifted, right? I think now we have no choice as creatives and storytellers, but to be completely truthful, you know, with our audience, because our audience now is completely aware, I think.
Post-crisis, you know, now we're all on this same earth, and we have this amazing representation across all of the different shows. And I would like to see sort of more minor, more frequent kind of team ups between queer people on different shows, between our Black superheroes across the world, and sort of start to see them working together. I mean, I just want like a pride team up. We could call it the Queeros, and it's all the queer superheroes just having like a gay old time.
That'd be awesome.
Oh, good.
Super Queeros, exactly.
I would love to see, and this is something I experienced too, coming from Senegal where everyone looks like me, and coming to America where not everyone looks like me, and being confronted with what that felt like and how I had to move differently, right? And for Corey, it's the same. She comes to this place and all of a sudden she's this race, and that means something here. And so I'd love to see us explore a moment or something where she's confronted with that as well, and how she responds to that. And even further, I would love for it to be an issue that's big enough that the rest of her tribe, Robin and Raven and Gar and Dove, notice it too, and they stand up. And I would love for us to portray allyship, right? From these tribe members who happen to be white, and Gar, of course, who. But yeah, I think that would send such a strong message to our audience, because so often I have great white friends and they don't know exactly what to do sometimes. I've had so many conversations. They're like, well, I don't know what to post because I don't want to say the wrong thing and I don't know how to show up for you. And so I think it'd be great to show two parts, like what it is to be confronted by the fact of your race for Corey, and then what it is for them to show up for her and what that looks like. I think it sends such a great message.
That's a great answer. You know, David, the next question is for you, because in the comics, Martian Manhunter, there was one particular interpretation of him that showed him having secret identities all over the world, right? So, you know, in Japan, he was a woman, and, you know, in Colombia,
I love that.
A little kid. So let's say you had to hand the baton off and John had to change his identity. Like, who would you like to see added to kind of like the palette of inclusivity that's possible through a character like this?
That's really, really good question. That's a really, really good question. You know, I mean, he can be whoever he wants, as you say.
Right.
So I think the issue with John is, why is he necessarily uncomfortable with being who he is?
Oh, yeah, it's a little unconventional, I know, to go out wearing this face, but I like it like this. I'm just as much John Jones, the human, as I am the Martian Manhunter.
It's like both myself and Magan, who's another shapeshifter, who's a white Martian, and me, who's a green Martian, we're continually being other people. And I think there's something in learning to be yourself and being happy with yourself. So if I'm going to hand this over to anybody, I'm going to hand it over to somebody who's green, and somebody who's like to say, look, you know, you got to be honest, you got to be comfortable with who you are. Because I think, you know, we have played with the Jean choosing to shapeshift because he finds his natural visage too upsetting for people. People will be too shocked. And, you know, maybe we'll get into a place where, you know, that's just no longer acceptable. You got to be who you are. You got to come out. I mean, so Superman can just put on a pair of glasses and he's Clark Kent. Supergirl can just do her hair different and she's Kara Zor-El, you know. And I think, be yourself, man. Be a big, green, beautiful self. And
that's a beautiful message.
And just, you know, I think it would be interesting to see how people react to that, you know, and see how he deals with people freaking out when they see his natural self. How do both he and Magan deal with the idea that they can't be their natural selves because it's too much for people? I think that's an interesting question.
Marvin, you mentioned before about wanting, you know, to talk about the prejudices that albinism faces all around the world.
Yeah.
You ready to make Tobias a hero? Like, talk to me.
I think that the hero is the one who stands for truth. And I hope that my character is able to bring his truth, not only to power, but then also to justice, you know, in Freeland.
You know, Eric, it's funny, what Marvin was saying speaks so much about personal motivation for these characters. And, you know, over like multiple seasons of The Flash, we've seen Barry mess with the timeline, you know, try to fix things, you know. I think part of what motivates him as a character and the other heroic characters in the show is trying to imagine a world where things look better. Do you feel like that's a vulnerability of his, like a character flaw?
Drives his heroism, I feel, is his heart. As we saw in the crossover this year, he's the paragon of love. Love is a very powerful thing, perhaps the most powerful thing in the world. Love and truth, though, should go hand in hand.
You know, the only way we're going to get through this is if we carry this burden together.
Barry Allen is leading with love, but looking for the truth. And that's something I personally believe in. And that's something I think maybe we could all maybe follow. So do I think that's a flaw? Oh, no. I think that's the greatest thing in the world. how great is it that an interracial couple represents the two paragons of what I think are the most important things, love. And even though he's not the paragon of truth, Crisis, we saw somebody else. Iris is a reporter. Her whole job is the truth. So you have this couple, to me, that goes to the world and says to the audience and says to the kids, again, every week, these are the two things that matter most. 3 would be family, love, truth, family. If you honor those and you go out into the world boldly, you are unstoppable, because the love that you bring is a form of compassion. That compassion will infuse others and perhaps make them act more compassionately. We need more of that in the world. The truth that Iris brings as a reporter, you want to talk about things I need to see more on television that I plan on doing more in the flashes. We need more truth. We need people to believe in science, okay? I think that part. Iris can bring that with Team Citizen. And then together, because in the case of Barry and Iris, it's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's 1 + 1 = 3. Together they create something that does not exist. That's family.
So let's say season 3 of Titans, they go to space. In the comics, the Titans have gone to space, gone to Tamaran, explored Corey's culture in a hands-on way. What do you want to see? How does that look like to you?
It's so funny you asked this. Right before this call, right before this meeting, rather, I had a call with our showrunner, and I pitched him an idea that we're able in season 3 to see Tamarin and to see the culture and the people and our values. And I said, and lucky you have an actress that's from a country that's rich in culture, and we can use so much of Senegalese dance and music and even our fighting styles incorporated into this, what I hope will happen, this moment where we get to see Tamarin.
As a fan, I would love to see that.
Yeah, we want to see that.
Let's do that.
Okay, so post-Crisis, most of these shows, with the exception of Titans is like a little bit of a gray area, but you're all on the same Earth, the same continuity, the same world now. Marvin, what character do you want Tobias to meet from one of the other shows?
I really, I'm a big Flash fan, so I really want to get over there. I would like to get together with Lex and do something crazy maniacal. I would like to see Static Shock pop up somewhere, anywhere.
First of all, I'm still on Marvin's suggestion of Tobias and Lex. So I built in my mind, now it's the Legion of Doom. So it's Lex, it's Tobias, it's Bloodwork, it's Trigon. Let's get a little Reverse Flash in there. Let's get everybody. Who's over on Legends? Oh, let's get back. I almost said Ra's al Ghul.
Is he still alive? Did they kill him?
Yeah, he can always come back.
I'm so sorry. I'm so distracted by his wonderful comment. I'm like, how can we pull this off?
Come on, man.
See it. Manifest your destiny.
Right.
Eric said something earlier about having his whole life been labeled a minority, and how he kind of hates that word because he's just him. And I could not relate to that more my entire life. Since I was 5-6 years old when we moved here, all I've ever been was different and other. And I never knew that this role was going to afford me the opportunity to meet so many fans and so many people who my casting meant so much to them, right? And I get messages from Black people, I get messages from the gay community, I get messages from all types of people who, for whatever reason, have felt marginalized and other and less than because of it. I just, all that backlash I got, I would take it 10,000 times again if it meant that I could inspire them in some small way or whatever it is, because it means a lot to me to be, I don't know, just to represent all those people, myself included, that have just always felt other. So
it was beautiful.
That spoke for all of us, and that spoke for so many, and that's everything for what what Nicole is doing, what you're doing, what we're all doing. That's the point. I don't care how many seasons we are here. That's the point.
Speak on it.
And it's forever. Like that's the beauty. Is it can't be taken away. It's forever. It's there. You know what I mean? It's going to reverberate for generations, hopefully, Lord willing.
I couldn't ask for a better ending. I want to thank you guys for taking the time out. Nicole, Marvin, Eric, Anna, David. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody watching out there. This has been DC Fandome. You can catch everybody on Supergirl, Black Lightning, Titans, Flash. And thanks for tuning in.